Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of a suitable agency and Sunder Nursery to a wonderful new session of suitable conversations at Sunder Nursery. This series of conversations was first inspired by our love for all things books. And a suitable agency is extremely grateful to everyone at Sunder Nursery for their support and encouragement in making this happen. And now, for the event we've been waiting for, Delhi on my plate, with two very special speakers, Pushpesh Pant and Swapna Liddle. Pushpesh Pant is a renowned author, columnist, broadcaster, anchor and teacher, as well as an independent producer of documentaries. Born in 1946 in a small Himalayan town, he was initially schooled at home and later in Nainital and Delhi. He pursued studies in history, international relations, and law at Agra University and the University of Delhi. He taught and conducted research for over 4 decades at JNU and has independently explored and researched Ayurveda. He has published over 50 books, including 20 focused on food. His book, India, the Cookbook, became a New York Times bestseller in 2010 and has been translated into Dutch and German. His recent works include From the King's Table to Street Food, A Food History of Delhi, and Lazzatnama, Recipes of India. Swapna Liddle's abiding love for the history of Delhi has translated into a PhD as well as several renowned books and articles. She also seeks to raise awareness about the city's historic precincts through her work for the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. Her books include Delhi, 14 Historic Walks, Chandni Chowk, the Mughal city of Old Delhi, Connaught Place and the Making of New Delhi, and she has edited and annotated a translation of Sairul Manazil. Thank you both for being a part of Suitable Conversations. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Pushpesh ji, your book, since this event is Delhi on my plate, Meri to bilkul, it's a metaphorical plate only, because I know very little about the history of food. Though I know Delhi, but for you, it's all about the food.
No, I think you are being unnecessarily modest. And first of all, let's get the beginning straight. Just before we are climbing up, she said, don't call me Swapna ji, call me Swapna. So I think she should dispense with the G in my name also. We can sort of chat about Delhi, which we equally love. That's number one. Number two, I think when I said she is being unnecessarily modest, there is no history of food, or there are no memories of food unless you are aware of the history of the city where you grow up. And I think when I was researching this book, her books were of such great help to me. Not necessarily the Connaught Place and Chandni Chowk, which are very lovable books on their own, but I think her book like The Broken Script, her book on cartography in Delhi, and they are the ones which make you think what Delhi has been, what Delhi is, and what Delhi, well, Parish's thought is likely outside the nursery, likely to become very soon. I came to Delhi very first with my parents in early 50s, and my memories of Delhi are food, not history. My mother was a, very interesting person. My father was a doctor who would say, ye kha sakte ho, ye nahi kha sakte ho, this is hygienic, this is not hygienic. He would insist on taking us to Wenger's, which was a proper restaurant with a live band playing. My mother would say, go to hell. मैं तो लक्कड़ हजम, पत्थर हजम चूरन खाऊंगी और चाट खाऊंगी. So I had that diverse pulse. Coming to Delhi meant A, chaat, B, fancy food in a restaurant, and then you had interesting things which you could associate. When we were packing to go back to Mukteshwar, the small town which has been mentioned, कि वहाँ से हरनारायण गोपीनाथ से बांस का मुरब्बा लेना है, वहाँ से शरबत लेना है, यहाँ से अचार लेना है, चेनामल के यहाँ से छेवो सिंधी हलवा लेना है. Right after partition, nobody called it Karachi halwa. It was loaded before these polarized times. So it was called either Bombay halwa or Sindhi halwa. So we packed those things with us. I came to Delhi independently to stay on my own in 65. And then again, it was Delhi's food on my plate. I mean, most of you our younger people, and I'm almost not prehistoric fossil, it's like that those were the days of food shortages. So my first experience, which I mentioned in the book, is the hostel mess told me, show me the ration card from Nainital, where your name is scratched out, and then we can enter your name in the hostel register to eat in this mess. So money was in short supply, food was in short supply. So some of the best memories Delhi on my plate are of a small dhaba called Azad in Shankar Market, where for 70 paise you had 4 rotis tandoori, dal free, and also for another 25 paisa, half a plate of sabzi. And this was an expensive place. You could have a cheaper place between Shankar Market and Bengali Market, a place called Refugee Market, nestling under the shadow of Modern School, where you could fill your belly for even 50 paise. Now, even compensating for inflation and so on, you can say ki kya zamana tha, kya khana tha. But then the point is, I'm not talking of a golden age of affordable food. I'm also trying to revive my memories when I talk of Delhi on my plate, of taste of that. Before I pass it on to Swapna again, my other memories are of a place called PRRM Coffee House. That's where the Delhi metro station in the vicinity of. There was a place called Theatre Communication Building and the underground air-conditioned market, the first AC mall in Delhi. There used to be a restaurant called the PRRM, Price Rise Resistance Movement, the India Coffee House. You could have a hamburger for 27 paise. 25 paise the cost, 2 paise the tax. 27 paise for a dosa, 27 paise for coffee, 50 paise plus for a omelette and toast. The mutton cutlet was a luxury, which is close to, with a piece of bread, about ₹1. But that was a very democratic space. So that's what I wanted to say, that it was not only the lingering taste of the food, which was cheaper then, more authentic, less adulterated, the dhabewala was more generous. But I have seen in that coffee house Dr. Ramanohar Lohia, Mr. Chandrasekhar, who was then not the Prime Minister, his Theatre Communication Building, his Young India office was there. People like D.R. Goyal of the Secular India, also Maqbool Fida Hussain with his yard-long brush walking barefoot there. And you had such fantastic people holding darbar and people listening to it. And it was like Sunder Gallery, Sunder Nursery. You could walk in, listen to a talk, maybe chip in, go out. Nobody would buy you a coffee, but you could possibly buy the 25 paise dosa and coffee on your own. So I think Delhi for me has always been food. And when emergency came, this restaurant was razed to dust because Sanjay Gandhi thought it was a seditious place, and a glitzy restaurant called the Rambles came up, which is mentioned in both her Connaught Place book and Malvika's book also of Perpetual City. So there I will take a breather.
On a tangent, a little bit of a tidbit, this interesting for those who might be interested in this, the Theatre Communications Building, why did it have this interesting name? It's no longer there, of course. It was a building which was originally a wartime building. So during the Second World War, from 1942 onwards, Delhi became it became the hub for the theatre of war in the Pacific. It became the supply point. And this was the Theatre Communications Building. It was the theatre of war in the Pacific. And so it worked as a sort of a communications hub. So that's why Theatre Communication Building.
It had nothing to do with dramatic arts. No theatre of that kind. No little theatre.
It was not that kind of theatre. So this was an old repurposed army building. In fact, a lot of the buildings of New Delhi at that point were repurposed. We used to have if you look at Cottage Industries Emporium, for the longest time, it was another one of those wartime buildings for a long time. The Survey of India maps office was right there, etc. But, reading your book, what I really like is this quality of a personal memoir. That it is, because you have seen Delhi so consistently for so many decades now, that your recollections of, and you, of course, you've seen it through the lens of food also, so that becomes even as a personal memoir, it becomes a very important document for us to be able to recreate what Delhi was, what its tastes were, and not only food, it's also about people and places. It is a map also. It's a memoir and a map of Delhi. If you can, the number of places that you talk about in Connaught Place itself, you have this kind of map which you can, in fact, it would be interesting as a small project to try and locate some of those places that are mentioned. I mean, they may have completely changed out of recognition now, but it would be useful to, I think, map that memoir that you create through writing this. But I'm curious, you decided that you would also go back and look at the history, way back. How challenging did you find that? Why did you, you could have made a book entirely out of your own memoir as well.
No, actually, even going back to Mahabharata times is going back to my personal memory. I mean, when I was always fortunate, I had better access to Mahabharata than Amar Chitrakatha. My mother was a Sanskritist. She did not force exactly the Bhandarkar standard edition down my throat, but we had more extensive stories from Mahabharata. And one of the interesting stories in Mahabharata is that Krishna was sent to the Kaurav court to negotiate a ceasefire or a peace, and he said, give me 5 villages: Panipat, Sonipat, Bagpat, Telpat, Indraprasth, and there will be no war. Duryodhan refused that. And my mother would always ask the question, why did Duryodhan refuse that? Because these 5 villages, Tilpat now is part of Delhi, Bagpat, is a famous mayhem place, the Jat land, and no offense meant to the Jats, where only the logic of Lathi rules, and the farmers sit on protest. Panipat is where, again, you have the Pancharanga achar, which everybody knows when you are driving up. Sonipat is known for Ashoka University and Jindal University as much as it is for Atlas Cycle Company at one stage, but also one of those places where Murthal dhabas are there. So my personal memory was, when I was traveling to Chandigarh, then I was betrothed to a lady in Chandigarh. She is no more, and we parted company once before that, but there's another long story. But on the way to Chandigarh, every time we stopped at Murthal Dhaba and at Parathas. And when we had Parathas, you said, Sonipat must have been a midway point to replenish your body's nourishment, even in earlier times. Panipat must have been a host to so many people when you couldn't zip past in a car over a flyover. You probably waited there, halted there, overnight stay, spent, branched off to Ambala and so on. Then again, you think in purely food terms, when the Grand Trunk Road was being built, where were the meal courses? Where were the meal ka patthar, these things which you see? Where were the sarayas? So now we are sitting very close to places like Arab Ki Sarai, Kalu Ki Sarai, Ladu Ki Sarai, Beer Sarai. So these sarayas were outside the walled city of Delhi. So when I came to Delhi, by that time the walled city had ceased to be the center of, actually, as she pointed out, walled city had ceased to exist in political significance when New Delhi was commissioned. So the center of gravity had shifted. And when the center of gravity shifted, even before that, the war, they had a loss of fortune. And actually, if one is honest, you studied it so well. In 1857, when the Muslims were systematically persecuted, their mosques were desegregated, and some of the treacherous Hindu brethren who had stayed with them bought those places over. So you have places like Gadaro Ki Haveli and so on, which later were bought back and given to the Muslims. But it came back to me that there was more to Delhi's food than Shahjahanabad, than Kareem, than New Jawahar, than kebabs. And you probably had those dhabas on the periphery. You had the bhatiyars on the sarayas where the food was there. And could one taste some of that? Then going back to Mahabharata again, why did Duryodhana not give these 5 villages? Because they are the ones which control entry and exit out of the city and the flow of the water of Jamuna. Then think in water of Jamuna, then you have those beautiful paintings, which in your collective now you'll be making accessible, I hope, to everybody, where Jamuna flowed past the Red Fort, and Musamman Bridge, say you had a boat ride to Agra via Mathura. Now, Jamuna being very polluted, nobody tries even that stunt at all. But the point is that I kept thinking, when Krishna was coming and negotiating between Indraprastha and Mathura. What is Mathura? A dairy land. Mathura ka doodh, dahi, peda, makhan, misri. That is what the frolicsome lord is playing with. And if you look around in Delhi, most of the halwais still come from either the Braj area or they come from Rajasthan, where slow, deep frying is practiced for gujiyas, for khoya, mawa, kachori, whatever it is. So I think going back to even mythic past was not going back to mythic past, but going back to a time which is sort of frozen, because you still have dahi, you still have rabdi, you still have makhan misri, you still have, well, nobody is eating poha anymore, but फिर भी आपको गुजिया वुजिया मिलती है, खाने को मिलती है, लड्डू वड्डू मिलते हैं. तो I think the story does go back and forth.
I think it's incidentally आपकी एक बात से मुझे I just one thought popped into my head, which was you were talking about having a meal at a dhaba on the path. This is one thing that I think, and both of us remember times when a very important part of a train journey was where the train stops and what you eat there. And similarly on driving trips also. In the era before expressways, where we want to get from point A to point B in the shortest possible time without taking in what is on the way. Our modern expressways are very boring because they don't go through anything. Whereas your old method was that you went through every little town, past villages, etc. And a large part of that trip was about stopping at these places and sampling the food. So that was one thought that came into my mind. But also, I think, was this challenging, trying to put together this food history, particularly if you're trying to kind of put seeing the evolution of what we eat, how we eat, how that has changed over the course of centuries, what other important points at which major changes have come. So how do you put together that? What are the kinds of things that you use? Did you use old recipe books? Did you use old texts? Did you use literature? What are the sources?
Actually, I entered a caveat right at the beginning, and this is not a scholarly book. I did not do archival research at all. I shamelessly plagiarized from people who have done wonderful work before me, including Swapna, including Narayani Gupta, including her mentor Percival Spear, and I don't think that one has to reinvent the wheel every time. She's herself going to make accessible to people digital archives in terms of pictorial visuals, so I don't have to worry about that. As long as I can rely on a respectable historical scholar who has written about Delhi between empires and done it from sources quoted. So if I really suspect, I can go, if I have any skill in Arabic or Urdu or Persian, to Delhi Akhbar and so on. And I think it is possible to don't have to do that at all. What I did was I tried to recollect what I had eaten in Delhi over the past 7 decades. Since I was an 8-year-old kid to I'm almost on the threshold of 80. And how the food has changed. And she talked very interestingly about dhabas. So you did not have to travel to a dhaba to sample dhaba food. Within the city of Delhi, you could do a circuit of dhabas, now which Sapra does often enough, dredging the bottom of the barrel, ki yahan kya hai, wahan kya hai. So you would say, one thing which stuck to my mind was that there was a Muslim dhaba and there was a Hindu dhaba. I mean, these terms are liable to be misunderstood, but post-partition, there was a dhaba like Kakeda Dhaba or Moti Mahal, which was not patronized by the Muslim residents of Delhi who were meat eaters, because they did not like these Hindu refugees who had taken over their properties or properties vacated by their kinsmen. Similarly, the Hindu diners did not eat in Muslim eateries, dhaba like in New Jawahar, or they did not trust curry कि क्या खिला रहा होगा, कहीं भैंस का कीमा तो नहीं होगा, अब etc. भैंस तो मैं एहतियात बरत रहा हूँ. You have understood what I meant, you know. But the problem is, if you did a circuit of Delhi, not only Connaught Place, so you would have very interesting myths. You would say, you mentioned the wartime disruption in Delhi's life. The myth when I came was that P.L. Lamba of the Quality had started selling on a ready some chole kulche, and that is their iconic dish. But if you historically follow, he was not a rags to riches story. Mr. Lamba was a very sharp businessman who was running Quality in wartime, and he had made his millions in rupee terms then, very nice profit, feeding American GIs ice cream who were staying in those barracks next door. And according to very good authentic sources, Mr. Lamba was put in touch with an ice cream maker in America by a veterinary officer attached to the American soldiers here, who told him that how to make creamier ice cream, larger bulk, etc., etc. But there were others who had a rags to riches story. You come to Pandara Park, in the Pandara market, there is Gulati, there is Pindi, there is Evermore, and so on. These were the ones who till in 49 and 51 were selling from Redis, kulchas, etc. in near India Gate. So there is an evolution in the sense of a Redi wala becomes a dhabe wala becomes a restaurateur of sorts. Kakida is a franchisee now in Gurgaon. There is a brand. They are genteel. Kareem, of course, has infinite branches, and Moti Mahal, besides the intellectual property fight with Bagas, has Moti Mahal Deluxe in London, etc., etc. Now, the interesting part was this, that you could go round Delhi and see how food was changing. A source which I found very interesting was Seema Chishti's memoirs about her parents. And Seema Chishti, in that book, there is an article by Shahid Amin, the historian from St. Stephen's, who was a professor of history in Delhi, meat-eating person. He says that the first time I had a tandoori murga was at Seema Khala's Shadi ka reception at Sheila Sandhu's house of Raj Kamal Publications. Surprising. They were meat-eaters. Why did Shahid Amin have to wait till he was 18 or 19 to a reception in a Punjabi publisher's house to... Because they would not frequent a Jhatka Murga, Tandoori Murga, na? So, and actually this Jhatka thing, again, sets you thinking about historical terms. In Gurgaon, where I stay, there's a green chick shop, which says Jhatka pork. Now, Jhatka pork is something which amuses me no end. I used to stay very close to a sweeper's colony in Delhi, in Nainital once upon a time, and they used to slaughter a pig ritually when a marriage took place or something. Now, those of you, I don't want to put you off the pork products, but chopping off or getting rid of a pig before you can consume it is a very upsetting, piercing process. So the point is you have to spear the poor piggy to death. But the problem is that how can you have a jhatka pork? I can't imagine that. You can have a Gorkha can jump up with a kukri and pull a stunt of knocking off in one blow the bhaisi ki gardan. But the pig is much better protected fat-wise. वो होगा ही नहीं कभी, झटका हो ही नहीं सकता. So anyway, I got into this कि झटका क्या था, prohibited क्या था, permitted क्या था. This led me to...
Yeah. And, you know, when you're talking about this kind of either food taboos or not eating together, those kind of sort of restrictions or taboos, and it's very interesting. I think we don't realize to how late these prejudices continued. I mean, some of them, of course, continue still. But for instance, I was like really interested to know, for instance, how important this issue of who you can eat with and who you may not eat with was. So let me tell you one little story about this man, Dr. Chiman Lal. He was a doctor, a medical doctor. He was the earliest medical doctor who had in Delhi, an Indian who had done his medical degree from Calcutta and come and started practicing in Delhi. And he, for various personal reasons, and no doubt, in 1852 he decided to convert to Christianity. And that put him in a little bit of trouble because he discovered that his fellow, he was a Kayast, and his fellow, his community, they kind of ostracized him. and he was so put off by it, he actually put in an ad in the newspaper saying that I am not going to, earlier I used to see people free of charge because he was a government official, a doctor. So he got his salary from there, but the government used to allow him to see patients privately, for which he was allowed to charge a fee. But he said, I have so far not charged any fee from the people of Delhi, but now I will. I will, because the people of Delhi have treated me so badly, particularly people of my own caste have treated me very badly. And despite the fact that though I have converted to Christianity, I have not been eating with Europeans. I have not sat down and eaten with them. So I found that very funny that it is, he, in his own mind, he felt that it's not the conversion is, you can convert, you can change your faith, but the bigger step is when you start eating with people of another faith. Or, so in that sense, I suppose sort of caste for him is more important than faith. So, those kind of things. Another thing that I found very interesting was that when St. Stephen's College the new building was built in your North Campus, and this was being built in the 1930s, one major radically different thing that they did was they made one dining hall. Why was it radical? The idea that all the students would eat in the same place from kitchens, a common kitchen that would be cooking food for everybody. That was it was a radical step of its time, because till then, even St. Stephen's College, in their Kashmiri Gate campus, they used to have separate hostels and separate, different communities, different caste configurations also, I guess. This was a different thing.
I think even more stunning than that was, you mentioned the caste doctor. I was reading the memoirs and source material of Sheila Dhar and Madhur Jafri. It's very interesting that the castes who are meat eaters, lusty meat eaters, encouraged their wives and ladies in the house to cook meat, but the ladies were not supposed to eat meat themselves. And this was an upper crust, high class, anglicized caste who had moved away from Sitaram Bazaar and Jama Masjid's vicinity to civil lines, and the family practically owned the civil lines, jo unko Morabbi mein mili thi. They would not have the women eating meat. This reminded me of the kind of stories which my mother used to tell me of Jora Sako Palace, where Tagore stayed, that the widows were of course not shaven and sent off to Vrindavan, but they were discriminated against, again in a very subtle manner. They were also not allowed to eat meat. So the invention of a Bengali recipe called Dhokar Dalna, the treat which tricks you into believing that it's meat but it is not meat, is made with lentils like kalmi bada with a gravy, is the kind of thing which you have in caste rasoi for women, where they would say कि हम तो गोश्त नहीं खाएंगे, टेबल में बैठेंगे इस एंड पे होंगे, छोटी लड़की को ग्रैंडफादर थोड़ा चखा देगा, या वरना आप खा वही रहे होंगे, केले की मछली, अरबी के कबाब, कटहल की बिरयानी and things of that kind. So this mock meat business is created in Delhi, and trying to create flavors of whole spices which were, I remember my aunt in Delhi, not in Delhi, she was in Nainital then, she used to say, आज मैंने गोश्त के मसाले की दाल बनाई है. She would not eat meat. But then if you don't eat meat, why should you have such obsession with gosht ka masala? Why should your dal taste like gosht? But to get back to her query, I think people were not eating together at home also. In anglicized caste families, you could eat at the table if you are the preferred bahu. But both these memoirs, Madhur Jafri's and Sheila Dhar's, make it very clear that there was discrimination between badi bahu, choti bahu, bade ladki ki bahu, chote ladki ki bahu, ladki ki bahu, ladki wale ke bacche. All this discrimination took place. And Anuti Vishal's, Mrs. Elsie's table does the same. I think so. There is this gender bias in kitchen, rishte, in Delhi, which was an eye-opener for me. I thought that the only thing would be social class, कि किसके संग खाएंगे, किसके संग नहीं खाएंगे. मगर घर में भी किसके संग खाएंगे, किसके नहीं खाएंगे, वो होगा. And it was pollution and purity were not the only thing. कि आपने convert किया है, आपने beef खाया. कि अब about the Tagore's, the charge was कि उन्होंने beef सूंघ लिया था. सूंघने से वो झूठा हो गया था. So they were polluted, Piyari Brahmins. But this I thought was one of the eye openers for me. Two things: that cheaper eating places allowed you freedom of speech. It was a more democratic space. Also within the household, where people claimed to be democratic and westernized and modern, they had toxic masculinity and patriarchy which dominated the dining, which I think was quite surprising to me.
Yes, I mean, this caius eating meat is, but you know, again, I was reading I will not mention the name of the book, but I was reading a piece of historical fiction where a caius man is depicted as a vegetarian without any specific lead up to it. So I was a little kind of puzzled. So that is some of the pitfalls that sometimes, you know, there are these stereotypes that there is a Hindu name, so you know, usko vegetarian aap automatically bana denge. That those kind of things should be, I think, sometimes happen. But I think one thing that we often forget, I mean, shouldn't forget, we don't forget, but we don't probably articulate it so much, is the fact that we think we are adventurous when it comes to food. We are trying out all sorts of new things that come up. But this ability to try out and experiment and accept new foods has been it probably has existed as long as people have been eating. Right?
There is a qualification to that. I think the food taboos, like beef and pork, were somewhere subliminally in your mind. And however adventurous you were, you drew the invisible line somewhere. I'll just recollect with you two things about Delhi food. One of them happened yesterday. My granddaughter sitting there and I were together at a place, and they were serving some foraged food from Jharkhand. And they said, will you eat ants chutney? So I said, why not? We have had it before, I can have it again. And she hadn't had it before, and she said, why not? I eat everything. So they were a bit surprised. The chutney came, which surprised me in more ways than one, because it was not a chutney, it was a pickle. They had pickled the chutneys, the poor ants, and they tasted like a pickle, not like a chutney. So if you eat a freshly ground ant chutney, you can tell the difference between a red ant chutney and a yellow ant chutney from Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. It's different tang altogether. If you love eating silkworms in poha is ahaha. What delight it is, like dried shrimps. But the second episode is we are eating in Lodi colony. My son, I think, ordered pork belly, and I ordered tenderloin, the same tenderloin, meaning bhaisa tha bichara, at once upon a time. But when it came, the lady who was serving came to us, and we were sharing each other's food, and she asked, do you mind my asking you a question? Are you two related? I said, yes, father and son. So she said, can I ask you another question? Both of you are eating meats prohibited, so you could neither be Muslims nor could you be Hindus. So I said, look, in my case, I'm an atheist. My son is a believing Hindu. But can I ask you a personal question now? So she said, please go ahead. She had no choice. I said, why are you asking this question? Because you are the one who's selling it. You are the one who's put in the menu. And now you are asking me to do this. So she was a bit embarrassed. But when you said, I think the present generation doesn't suffer from this baggage, and they can probably try everything twice, as the old detective novel title says. But there are problems. I can eat everything, I thought, till I went to Hong Kong and I was offered monkey's brain when it was being scooped out from under the table live. So it was much close for relationship comfort, so I could not eat that. I can't eat a dog in Nagaland. My mother was very fond of cats, so I have stopped short of cat. And I think I have had snake and all, but I am not particularly partial to offals. So that is something where I would draw the line. But present generation has no problems. And also the present generation has things simple. If you have a blue cheese-filled naan tasting portion and Indian accent with something where you don't even recognize the offals are packed like a sausage and you don't know what has gone inside, so theek hai. He's a great chef giving you a tasting portion and is disguised very well.
But I also feel that look at the revolutions that must have come about in Indian food cooking when some of the things which we consider fundamental to our foods, uh, and when you look back in historical time and you realize that it is actually so new. I was just discussing this with my sister recently, and I was saying, "Ke aloo kab khana shuru kiya? When did we start eating potato?" And she said, "Potato probably the first reference in Mughal cooking takes place in during Jahangir's time, and even there is some doubt whether it's actually a potato they are talking about it or something. Yeah, sweet potato. That things like potato, things like chili, these are tomato. These are new world foods which come into Indian cuisine, or the first introductions are themselves really very late, and probably start getting popularized only by about the late 16th, 17th centuries. I mean, that's amazing. 17th
Actually,
centuries.
I'm a contrarian on this one. I don't believe in the Columbian exchange. I don't think that the chilies did not exist in India before the Portuguese set their feet here. You have the hottest chili in the world, the Bhut Jolokia, the Naga Chilikia, the Delhi chili, the Raja Chimirchi, which is very much a child of this soil. And those of you who have traveled to Gwalior and the fort, and there is a Gujri Rani ka Mahal at the foot of the fort, has a very old sculpture dating back to 7th or 8th century, which shows a person eating a corn cob. So it did not come with the Portuguese. At Chilis, I have another dispute that unless the Portuguese imported with them the condor from Latin America, who with the wingspan of 9 meters flew up to Bhutan and dropped the bird shit to Chile to grow there, there is no way that this, for 400 years they ruled Goa, and chili is not a major crop or a feature in Goan cuisine. It is in Bhutan, it is in Nepal, it is in Uttarakhand. So that's one. The potatoes, yes, interesting, but some form of potato closely related to batata, which the Portuguese brought, must have existed in this country, because Bhavaprakash Nigantu and other Ayurvedic texts refer to Pindalu, Kachalu, Raktalu, etc. So maybe it is like the hapus, that they brought cutting, grafting of a mango from Brazil, which on Ratnagiri mangoes gave us the Alfonso, or which is the hapus. But the point is that mango is something which grew here originally. I mean, of course, the Chinese also claim that they had. Chinese, of course, had everything before us. So we push back our historical research every time, 5,000 years. So this game will continue. But the point is, I don't think that if you believe this, it's like the Moti Mahal claim. My grandfather invented Madi Kali dal, butter chicken, tandoori chicken, kadai paneer, everything. So that's one. But so it's like that the Portuguese brought everything. They brought the papaya, they brought the pineapple, they brought the guava, they brought the chili, they brought the potato, they brought the sweet potato. But what she said is quite right. We have a reference to a potato sachet being gifted to by Terry, the envoy sent by Queen Elizabeth, to a relative of Jahangir in Delhi, and it was a prince's ransom. So people did not eat that. So you can ask interesting questions. What was the dosa masala concocted out of? Was it unripe plantains? Was it some variety of wild potatoes or yams? What filling was there? Now you of course have a dosa which has a paneer, which has a keema, which has an egg. So food keeps doing this. So I have no problems with the food came from Latin America or not. I'm not a Deshbhakt. I'm not a Swadesh Abhimani of the variety that we had everything and nobody else had anything. So maybe samosa came through the Central Asian route. The coconut came floating from Micronesia 10,000 years ago. Bajra might have come the same way from Africa. Coriander and other things might have come from the fertile green crescent from Central Asia. So everything is amalgamated here. So I'm not making these comments to say that we had everything. But we should not be accepting certain theories inflicted on us by foreign historians, and I'm no Modi Bhakt, I must enter into this immediately. When I say everything is not a foreign conspiracy, so this is not a foreign conspiracy that they are forcing us to say कि आपका तो खाना भी बाहर से आया था, आपकी हर चीज़ बाहर से आई थी, आप आज on a day of ritual fasting you can eat potatoes, but the yam came to save us from a famine in 18th century in Travancore, Cochin. The sabudana came that way. So fair enough. So what we consider pure and kosher for our religious rituals, even pan ka patta, 2,500 years before the birth of Christ came from Southeast Asia. So did the erica nut. But the short point is that when you sit today and eat in Delhi, you say, kahan se kya kya aaya hai? You know, so we think in terms of biryanis and pulavs and kebabs. Why not momos? Who have displaced kebab long time back. There is tandoori momo, there is a chocolate momo, there is a baked momo, there is a momo stuffed with chow mein. So why not a momo? And momo was an exotica. In 67, 68, when I was teaching in Delhi University, there was a kettle of chan, there was thukpa, and of course there was ganja, which was cheap and available in Tibetan Majnu ka tila. But since then, and when we talk of dhaba, you know, Swapna is so interesting that dhaba became fashionable when Claridge's opened a restaurant, ethnic restaurant called the dhaba. So you wanted to have dhaba fare and they had a munji. And once I did spot a cockroach and I wasn't sure whether it was part of the ambience created or was it the dhaba style of cooking and cleaning which contributed to that.
Should we move on to, our people who've been listening, they may have some questions for you.
Questions or comments or contradictions.
Hello sir, hello ma'am. I have a question regarding that bhuna hua masala wala so concept that I have been hearing from childhood कि ये masala जो भुना हुआ होता है. There is a differentiation over region and like South India में शायद भुना हुआ होता है या North India में भुना हुआ होता है. Is there something like that? Can you share some a thought from your end?
Please.
नहीं देखिए, before we come to bhuna masala, we come to masala.
Yes, sure.
Before we come to the bhuna part, we come to the masala part. Now, what is a masala? Masala is a spice, but when does the spice become a masala? My good friend Sadaf Hussain has just written a book called Masala Mandi, and he's specializing in masala mixtures. So mixed masalas are one, like you said, South Indian masala or North Indian masala, but masala becomes when a whole spice is ground, masal diya jata hai, uska paste banta hai, so then it becomes a masala. It doesn't have to be bhuno. You can use it for a tempering, seasoning of oil in which you are cooking food. It could be chokna, tadka, bagharna. It could be bhuna of a masala, which is stir frying it with garlic and onions if you use that. If you are not using garlic and onion, then you are using a ground coriander powder and turmeric powder and chilies and stir frying them very skillfully with curds. तो वो दही का मसाला आप बना रहे, ग्रेवी बन रहे, मगर उसका भुनाव फर्क होगा. When you say bhunav, you actually mean bhuna masala is the so-called myth of the mother gravy in Indian terms of for Mughaliya khana. वो मुगलिया खाना तो था नहीं, उसका भुने मसाले का असली राज अगर आप जानना चाहते हैं, sorry, you will have to bear with me for another 1 minute, is the dhaba style of cooking. When the Sardarji or the refugee who had come from partition became a richer, he didn't have to do the dirty work himself. So he called my ancestors from Kumaon, Garhwal and Nepal to do the bhunna. Those people were given to the dirty habit of scratching the unmentionable parts of their body, smoking bidi while they were doing this, and the food got burnt. So the idea was to add lot more grease into it and keep bhunoing it, keep scratching yourself, keep smoking your bidi. So the pyaz jalega nahi, wo caramelize hoga. ये भुने मसाले की असलियत ये है. So there is a dish called bhuna gosht, but have you ever come across the bhuni sabzi? बल्कि आप कहते तला भुना. So what we call bhuna masala is more a tala masala than bhuna masala. And the logic of bhuna masala is that when you dry roast a bhuno, a masala on a hot griddle, it will release its volatile aromatic oils. But unless you grind it immediately and use it, it would be useless. If you grind it in an electrical mixer, the speed of the motor would ruin it also. Packaged masala will ruin it. That is where when you say कि भुना मसाले का जो खेल है ना, is very tricky. In South Indian, you don't have a bhuna masala in sambar. You don't even have a chettinad fish or a mutton or something. ये यहाँ का ही रिवाज है, जहाँ ढाबे वाले ने बेचारे गढ़वाली कुमाऊनी भूखे नंगे हमारे यहाँ से बुला के रखे और उन्होंने मतलब bless their souls, they are now ruining the food everywhere in the world, including Michelin restaurants in Los Angeles area and Hong Kong, etc. You go to any place, you will see at a tandoor a Nepali, a गढ़वाली और a कुमाऊनी. तो वो चक्कर भुने मसाले का बिल्कुल फर्क है.
I have just one, बीच में मैं I'll interrupt. आपका क्या? I'm assuming that you like to cook. Do you like to cook?
I love to cook, but nobody else except my granddaughter occasionally approves of what I cook. In our house, unfortunately for me, my son is a brilliant cook. And he insists कि तुम खाना खराब कर दोगे, you will ruin the ghost. तुमने क्या कर दिया, मुझे सुधारना पड़ेगा. It applies to khichdi, it applies to dal. It goes back to the question which this young man asked there. He says that I don't know कि किस stage पे मुझे मसाला डालना है. And I owe it to Shannu Khurana ji, the great singer. I was talking in a gathering like this and this old lady was doing this, disagreeing, registering her disagreement very strongly. So I could do nothing else, but after the talk I went to her and said, I think you did not agree. He said, no, I couldn't agree. You are all wrong about tadka, chauk, baghar. And she explained to me very patiently, first when you put in hot oil the masala, that is chaukna. When you, in between the process of cooking, add it, it is bagharna. When you pour it on top as a tempering, is a tadka. So my son is a believer of the old school कि मसाला सिलबट्टे पे उसी वक्त पिसा होना चाहिए, प्रेशर कुकर इस्तेमाल नहीं होना चाहिए, मसाला ताज़ा होना चाहिए, वो तड़का छौंक बघार का फ़र्क होना चाहिए, और वो सुधारने में लगे रहते हैं. So it sort of kills my creativity.
Are we having some more questions?
Pushpesh ji, one of the takeaways I was really looking from this conversation is to understand from you what is the Delhi ka khana. You know, Delhi on my plate is the subject of the conversation, and where my angst is coming from, I'll tell you. You know, we hear so much about Delhi ka khana. Everybody talks about Delhi ka khana. Aapki book ka title bhi wahi hai. You know, you read Delhi Times, any film star that comes, aur Delhi mein to Delhi ka khane ki kya baat hai. And 30 years that I've lived in this city, I haven't had a good meal in Delhi. You know, everything over here is so overrated. You know, you talk about, you know, you compare the food as a geographical entity. If you compare the per capita, you know, quality of relishment that you get from the food here versus a place like Amritsar or for the matter Lucknow, or for the matter places in Northeast or Bengal, Calcutta, Delhi is abysmally low in terms of the quality of the food. So please tell me,
yes,
what is good here?
No, I'll tell you. What is good here, we'll come to that later. But I think the title of the book is not related to Delhi's food. It is Food History of Delhi, which does not necessarily automatically translate to food of Delhi as something special category of Delhi's food. Delhi का खाना पंजाबी रिफ्यूजी खाना है, प्री-पार्टीशन पंजाबी खाना है, कश्मीरी खाना है, like a recipe of शब्द here, उसमें लखनऊ टाइप के अवधी कबाब भी हैं. And you would probably permit me to disagree with you about the Lucknow ka khana, which is far more overrated than the Delhi ka khana. The Delhi ke khane mein problem kya hai? Delhi ke khane mein problem ye hai ki I must say that I pity you, if you permit my using this condescending word, that you probably don't have good friends in Delhi who call you home and invite despite 30 years of stay here. Some of the best meals in my life I have had are the khana not of the शहर का खाना. Suhail would not forgive me for this. वो वॉल्ड सिटी का खाना नहीं है, वो किसी छोटे आदमी ने घर में बिला के खिलाया है. सरदार जी जो चाप लहसुन अदरक के पानी में बना रहे, विनोद दुआ इंट्रोड्यूस मी टू हिम, मायापुरी चौक में जो बनाते हैं. और यू गो टू बस्ती निज़ामुद्दीन, जहाँ का खाना, जहाँ की खुशबू, जहाँ के एरोमाज आर वेरी डिफरेंट फ्रॉम चांदनी चौक. वन ऑफ माई रिग्रेट्स इज दैट शी शुड, बिसाइड्स द वॉक बुक विच इज आउट ऑफ प्रिंट नाउ, डू अ बुक व्हाट शी हैज़ डन लाइक कनॉट प्लेस एंड चांदनी चौक फॉर बस्ती निज़ामुद्दीन. वहाँ का जो खाना है, वहाँ का खाना वो भी टूरिस्ट ट्रैप वाला खाना नहीं कि आप लंगर में खा रहे हैं या गालिब के कबाब खा के लौट रहे रहे हैं, वो फ़कीर का हलवा और रोटी खा के देखिए, उसमें बड़ी रौनक हैं फ़कीरों के डेरे। आप किसी सिंधी दोस्त के घर में जाके खाना खाइए, आपको कोई घर में खाना खिलाए गुंजन गोयला जैसा बनियों का खाना खिलाए, नॉट व्हाट शी डज फॉर अ पॉपिंस इन अ 5-star प्लेस। आई थिंक आई वुड नॉट से दैट दिल्ली में फूड का रेलिश नहीं है। आई वुड नॉट मेंशन एनीथिंग अबाउट अमृतसर, इज अ होली सिटी, उस खाने की बात और है, उस खाने की बरकत अलग है। कलकत्ता में फिर खाने का मज़ा बहुत सारा है, मगर वहाँ भी दिल्ली कनेक्शन के बिना गुजर नहीं होती है कि मुगलिया पराठा होना चाहिए, कुछ कीरी कबाब होना चाहिए अडर वाला, फिर कुछ उसमें भी खेल ये होना चाहिए वाजिद अली शाह के ज़माने में डीम वाली पोटैटो वाली बिरयानी बनी कि नहीं बनी, या मुर्शिदाबाद का शहर वाली कुजीन नवाब साहब के सिराजुद्दौला के ज़माने से कब था। अनफॉर्चुनेटली इट इज़ नॉट ओनली द ब्रिटिश, इज़ नॉट ओनली द मिस्टर नेहरू हु हैड टू लिव विद द trying to validate their mandate by saying कि हम तो मुगलों के वारिस हैं। we are having the other way round now कि अब तो मुगलों ने कुछ नहीं किया। मगर मेरा ये मानना कि दिल्ली का खाना मुगलिया खाना नहीं है, दिल्ली का खाना मुसलमानों का खाना नहीं है, दिल्ली का खाना बनियों का खाना है, कायस्थों का खाना है, सिंधियों का खाना है, कश्मीरियों का खाना है, पारसियों का खाना है। जब 100 साल पहले यहाँ के श्रॉफ साहब बैठे थे जो म्यूनसिपैलिटी में थे, उसके पहले आप कीजिए जो कलकत्ता से आए थे होम्योपैथ डॉक्टर साहब जिनके आप विवेकानंद रहे थे, व्हेन दैट डॉक्टर सेन डाइड चांदनी चौक रिमेन क्लोज फॉर 2 days एंड वी टॉक इन टर्म्स ऑफ प्लाजा सिनेमा जिसके मालिक हुआ करते थे सोहराब मोदी, उसकी छत पे पारसी अंजुमन का दफ्तर चलाते थे, जो भुनो पारसी अंजुमन में खाना बनता था। वाई हैव वी फॉरगॉटन ऑल माइक्रोस्कोपिक माइनॉरिटीज हु हैव इनरिच्ड दिल्ली फूड इन अ मैनर विच इज़ फैंटास्टिक। The only thing is you will not get in the bazaar domain. It is घर का खाना है, दिल्ली का असली खाना घर का खाना है। वो एक चीज़ आपको खिलाएगा, 2 चीज़ खिलाएगा, बड़ा मज़ा आएगा आपको खाने में। वो कलकत्ता में भी वो चीज़ अब कहाँ बची रही है। आधा कलकत्ता तो अब सॉल्ट लेक सिटी में रहता है, और जो रहते हैं वो वहाँ भी टूरिस्ट ट्रैप है कि नकुल नंदी की दुकान में आप जा रहे हैं, बीन के यहाँ जा रहे हैं, आप गरिया हाट में सरदार जी का वो खा रहे हैं कि ढाबा खा रहे हैं कि बालीगंज 6 में खा रहे हैं। आई हैव डन दिस, आई हैव बीन द अनफॉर्चुनेट विक्टिम ऑफ सैम्पलिंग फूड फॉर अदर बुक्स देन दिस। आई डोंट थिंक दैट देयर इज़ वन प्लेस हिंदुस्तान में जो कह सके कि हमारा खाना ये है। टू आंसर योर क्वेश्चन इन अ वेरी शॉर्ट थिंग, इट इज़ लाइक शंकर्स डेफिनेशन ऑफ ब्रह्मा, नेति 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 नेति। इट इज़ नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस। सो दिल्ली का खाना इज़ नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस, नॉट दिस।
There are some.
Hi, both of you. Firstly, I just wanted to say that the whole gender aspect that you mentioned, I think Jora Shako is one very good example, but I think it still continues and so relevant even today. Like there are households where the woman eats later, so completely agree with you on that. My question is entirely different though. It's because you've studied food so much, I wanted to know what's your take on whether there ever was or it still continues is whether there is a concept of veg biryani. And second part of that question is and there's so much debate all around India about which is the best biryani. So would love to know which is your favorite or if you have a special.
Fair enough. Very nice question. I am a person who believes that there is no such thing as biryani. 150 years ago, you find the mention of biryani only as one of the 12.5 and more pulavs called birinj biryani. It was one variety of pulav which was prepared with fried rice. And Salma Hussain has done a very bright work on this. But the problem is that if you are Pratibha Karan and if you are respectable Salma Yusuf Khan Hussain, you are an expert on biryanis and you are writing a book on biryani. So there is a vested interest of not upsetting the apple cart and saying कि biryani नाम की कोई चीज़ नहीं होती है. Before we come to veg biryani, what is the biryani? Biryani is a very ostentatious, expensive, exotic, celebratory dish. आपको बिरयानी खिला दी, तर कर दिया, इससे महंगा कुछ कर ही नहीं सकते थे. 400 रुपये किलो की बासमती चावल था, कितने 100 किलो का तोले का उसमें केसर था, केवड़े का जल था, मलाइयत थी, चॉइसेस कट ऑफ मीट थे, घंटों वो देग में पकी थी, कटी ऐसे थी, मीट मैरिनेट 4 घंटे किया था. तो आपकी हिम्मत नहीं पड़ेगी कहने की साहब बिरयानी बुरी बनी थी. मैंने यहाँ तक बदजौक लोग देखे हैं जो बिरयानी लेते हैं प्लेट में, उसके ऊपर कोरमा उड़ेलते हैं। कोरमा अगर नहीं उड़ेलते हैं, ऐसे वल्गर लोग कम होते हैं, फिर भी उसमें बुरानी रायता मिला लेते हैं, मिर्ची का सालन मिला लेते हैं, बघार के बैंगन मिला लेते हैं। तो बिरयानी की तो ऐसी तैसी हो गई। एंड आई एम बीइंग इकोनॉमिकल विद वर्ड्स व्हेन आई एम अब्यूजिव। What is my favorite is a yakhni pulao, which is cooked in stock. That is what Lucknow has been mentioned here. Abdul Halim Sharar, in his last phase of Orient culture in Lucknow, specifically mentions, and Mr. Sharar should have known, he had spent some time post Gadar in Wazir Ali Shah's court and had lived through the last days of Bahadur Shah Zafar. He says that people in Lucknow look down on biryani. They think it's like a malgoba. They only think that people who don't know anything about food eat biryani, and they'll prefer a yakhni pulao. Now, we'll not get into the details of how yakhni pulao is a nobler dish than a biryani, but the point is that if there can be a vegetarian pulao, what is a pulao? The definition of pulao in a 4th, 5th century ancient text is, it came from Central Asia maybe, rice cooked with condiments, meat and vegetables. ठीक है, तो वो पुलाव भी बन सकता है, स्टॉक वेजिटेरियन भी हो सकता है, नॉन वेजिटेरियन भी हो सकता है, कॉन्डिमेंट्स स्पाइसेस भी हो सकते हैं, आपका जायकेदार पुलाव भी हो सकता है, वो भी दम पे पक सकता है. So ये, I think this biryani myth needs to be exploded. Only reason is why did it come into existence? People wanted to curry favor with richer patrons, including Gora Saabs, and wanted to tell them कि हमने आपके लिए कोई खास चीज़ पकाई है, and that was the biryani. आप you go back to, I hope some of you understand Hindi, most of you should actually. It's being shoved down the throat of even people down south of Narmada, तो दिल्ली में तो जो बैठा हो तो हिंदी समझे. आपने एक मुहावरा सुना होगा, ख्याली पुलाव पकाना. To spend your days in idle daydreaming is, have you ever heard a phrase which says कि बिरयानी पका रहे थे हम? तो I rest my case there.
Thank you so much.
Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. I'm here. So, I have this question regarding the veg dishes of Delhi. So, this is my first time in Delhi. Coming from Northeast. Actually, I have tried a lots of green veggies in here, in there. I mean, so my first surprise here was, so I took one tiffin service in here. So they serve only veg food. But I couldn't see much green in there. So I have this question. I have been like, I would say, complain about.
No, look, if you are coming from Northeast,
Yeah.
you have more to complain than just this much. Because you see, in Northeast, they use minimal spicing. And all the flavors are brought out in both vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes, whether it's masor tenga or because of khar. And the khar is the alkaline thing, which is a universal masala for everything. It could be papaya khar, it could be bamboo khar. So you would miss the basic cooking style which is in your genes. You also will miss the kind of saag, spelled with an X, which you have in Northeast.
Yeah.
You just have pork and greens and it tastes divine. Yeah. So अब here to mention pork and मुगल मंडप में बैठ के pork की आप बात करेंगे तो कुफरान नेमत हो जाएगा. You go to a place like Chhattisgarh, you go to Jharkhand, you go to Odisha, you have sago, and you have variety of greens you have are infinite. So I would totally agree with you. In Delhi, the greens are not valued very much unless it's सरसों का साग, जिसमें मीट भी पक जाएगा,
And palak.
मक्के की रोटी भी हो जाएगी, या पालक के संग हो जाएगा, which to a person coming from hills is tasteless in Delhi. Palak is tasteless, methi about passable, सरसों मार पीट के, you don't even see bathua, kulthi, poi, benga, sunsunya. You don't see these sags here at all. Cholai. So I totally sympathize with you, but it's not going to change. What happens is that unless you are eating in somebody's house, who wants to give you a plebeian dish like saag and roti? There is a very interesting, आपकी नज़र से तो गुजरी होगी, the memoir of Siddiq, Smoke Without Fire. Just before 1857, a fakir goes to a house and foresees, like in Zunoon, the slaughter about to take place. And he says, मेरे लिए मेथी का साग और पराठे बनवाओ. So methi ka saag was a preferred dish in Muslim areas in Delhi pre-1857. It was eaten like that. You again have Twilight in Delhi, Ahmed Ali's. where it says that the wife of the protagonist is making aloo ki sabzi apne ghar mein, and not aloo ka salan. No meat goes into that at all. Actually, this takes me back to what she mentioned, Swapna mentioned, about the caste who was a totally vegetarian. There are castes who belong to different denominations like Radha Swami sect, or a Sikh who otherwise would have been eating meat but becomes a Namdhari, stops eating meat. So there are myths about a community being necessarily either meat eating or vegetarian. You say Brahmins are vegetarians. What about the Kashmiri Brahmins? What about the Saraswat Brahmins? What about the Maithil Brahmins? What about the Bengali Brahmins? So you have these myths which are perpetrated. But to go back to your question, when we come to vegetarian food, unfortunately we try to exoticize our vegetarian dishes. कि आलू बेचारा भी जब तक वो आलू का दम नहीं बनेगा तो न कश्मीर में खाया जाएगा, न बंगाल में खाया जाएगा, न बनारस में खाया जाएगा, न आलू के खुले होंगे, न जयपुर में खाया जाएगा, न लखनऊ में आलू की कतली बनेगी.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Very informative session. One comment and one question. The comment is about the gender dynamic that you have talked about. My professor once told me the story of how in Bengali households, especially in Bhadralok households, there is a tradition of serving fish head to the korta of the house. So who is the head of the family will have the head of the fish as a symbol that he is the head of the family. And even in the crisis situation, people will prefer to serve the rich food or the better food to the male of the household. Similarly, I've been to Orissa, and here's the question. So the idea of how in a culture or in a food history, a crisis and requirement of a culture takes part. So I'm from Uttarakhand, and I've seen people, and when you mentioned Pindalu, it was I was surprised because people do not talk much about Pindalus. But in Uttarakhand, there is a custom where the entire village gathers together, and there is a parade sort of Bakra. So Bakra is sort of it's a ritual practice, and people gather together and they slaughter the Bakra, and entire village, mainly men, cook the Bakra, and then it serves as a prasadam. Similarly, when I was talking about Orissa, there is a pokhar bhat, there is a dish, pokhar bhat. And the thing is that they've told me that it is served because there was a crisis in Orissa, there was famine. And it is related to famine history because they didn't had anything to eat. So, you know, soaking or getting just rice water and just thoda sa usme chonk kar diya ya wo bhi kabhi kabhi nahi, eating it with just a pinch of salt. So that is how this dish emerged, and now it's a popular food in Orissa.
Can I interrupt you? Are you doing sociology?
No, I am doing history actually.
No, anyway, my question was related because when you said the dish was created during time of famine, we have been a chronically impoverished country where we have had Durbhik and Akal, not in during British times only, in Mughal times also, much before that also. The majority of Indian people living in villages lived in shortages, droughts in Durbhik and Akal are mentioned in Hitopadesh and Panchatantra and Mahabharata and such like thing. The king was evil and the Akal came. So these dishes were regular dishes eaten by people who could not maar se pet bharna tha, starch tha. So I don't think that pakar bhat was an evolution of food for poorer people during a famine. That's number one. And Uttarakhand, what you said is interesting because again, when the bakras are slaughtered, the best pieces of meat are eaten by the males. And the watery gravy called bhat is put in lotas and given to women. It is not as if in times of crisis only the women get less. They get less any which way. They eat coarser grains, they eat leftovers, because they eat in the end. So they are not going to cook afresh for themselves. What surprises me in researching food is that it happens not only in poorer families, it happens in even richer families.
Yeah, so what I have said about the Bhadralok. So Akal you have mentioned, Akal that is the different words that we use for famine or bad times. when इतना भी नहीं है कि that दुर्भिक्ष के भिक्षा भी नहीं दे रहा कोई. So the time's so bad. So what I am very confused about is when we read more about the origin of a food, should we also look at, because
No, I'm sorry, when you say origin of a food, you mean origin of a recipe.
Yeah, origin of a recipe, and how did it get, prevalent in this particular region. So I always connected this, especially pokhar bhat or these foods, which are very simple and very digestible, but also, fills you. I have connected them with...
Have you had a pakar bhat?
Yeah, I have had it.
Where did you have it?
Orissa.
Were you given some bhajas with that?
Yeah, the multiple...
You were given some pickles with that?
Yeah.
That was not poor man's food. That was a pakar bhat being served as a curated meal for tourists coming to Odisha, which is not easy to digest. After that, you go to sleep in summer afternoons.
Okay. So there is a transition. I am hoping that... but could you please talk more about it?
We should remain optimistic.
Okay. So a little bit more about...
Can we have somebody else also?
Yeah, sure.
We can probably...
Okay.
Hello, sir. Hi. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to convey my deepest appreciations that I've had towards you. I have not found a lot of people who've had the shared mutual interest in things, starting all the way from Hindustani classical music to football to food. And as someone who's been working in association with all of them, let me just tell you, Kishori Amunkar ke gaane se lekar ke aapka interest into football is something that has deeply been of interest to me. Cannot name the number of nights I've fallen asleep listening to your Amit Verma podcast, which is 5 hours long. So there's that, first of all. But coming from Mithila, someone who's actually been introduced to a lot of food which is fermented. So there's Adaudi, Sakraudi, Kumadaudi. I have never had the appreciation for the complexity in nature of fermented food. And I'm just wondering if you had some advice for a good recipe or a good dish that you would suggest that I could get inducted into and perhaps appreciate the complexity of my own food, because I've always struggled with finding the right food from Mithila itself. So
I must confess my ignorance, because when we come to fermentation, my interest is towards fermentation, which leads towards alcohol. Fermentation and intoxication and distillation and, fermented pickle, fermented achar, which the lady mentioned, pakar bhat. It has something to do with the climate of the region. Come to think, your mind is not traveling south. Idli and dosa are basically fermented batter. No, you don't like them, but they're fermented batter essentially. You have sana in Goa, which is fermented bread. So what happens is that you ferment ingredients of food either to improve their longevity or to improve the probiotics or to change the flavor of something which you are having. Now, Mithila has a problem. Mithila has a problem of a kind that it is surfeit of riches also. Aapka maach bhi hai, makhan bhi hai, pan bhi hai. On one side you are having Nepal border, on one side you are having Bengali influence. So, Mithilanchal also has Brahmins who have no inhibitions about eating meat. And you have the Darbhanga Raj, which is a history of having that. So I think the problem is that Mithila is one of those exceptional pockets like Chettinadu in Tamil Nadu, where you, or the Saraswat Brahman somewhere else, where you have a very typical food. I would not be able to advise you what you should do with your food, but I would like to say that you probably should compare your fermented dishes which you like with fermented dishes which you don't like. Like I have always liked to tinker around with the fermented batter with dosa. No, my problem is that I don't believe in the theory of finer palate. I mean, you may greatly love a dish which is not a very sophisticated, refined dish. She's talking of bhat. I'm talking of offals. Somebody else loves offals. My son loves offals. इसको पहाड़ में बुटुआ कहते हैं, कच्चा पक्का कहते हैं. Half the meat is cooked, half of it is not cooked. You can have the hair of the skin on your mouth. You have kaleji, which is not cooked at all. You have lungs, you have blood. I'm a bit squeamish about that. But some people love that. So it's not a question of refined palate. It is what you like. And everything has a pleasure of its own. But fermentation, my interest is towards fermentation distillation.
Hi, good evening, sir. My question is regarding the tomatoes, how they came to India through Portuguese. That's what they claim. So I'm from Narnola, a small city 2 hours west of Delhi, and it's a very arid climate. So we have this local fruit called kachri, and it has the same texture as a tomato, I would say. And we still use them to give the tanginess to the curry, in tadka and all. So what's your take on that, and what other things like rest of India used before the tomato came to India?
A very good question, sir. I think tomato is one thing where I would submit to the argument that it was brought by the Portuguese. You go to Bengal, it's called Belati Begun. And it was avoided in traditional pure Indian foods because it was tamasic, because of its red color. Its tanginess has made it spread all over the place. It replaced things like kachri. Before that, people used, like in Kashmir, dahi for the tanginess till the tomato came. In other parts of the country, in sambar, tamarind was used. In other parts of country, mangosteen, distant cousin, kokum was used. So you had regional variations of tanginess, which were also social class gradations. Who could use unripe mango, who could use amchur dried powder, who could use khatai, who could use anardana. So there was a whole range of souring agents which were used.
So just add on to that, like how you have sun-dried tomatoes, right? So we also have like sun-dried kachris, so it lasts throughout the
I
year.
haven't had sun-dried kachris. I would be very happy if you could let me sample some sun-dried kachris.
I will definitely mail
Because
you
also
some.
the kachris, other uses tenderizing the meat in marination.
Right.
So, and there is a lady where I stay in Gurgaon, who makes a kachri ki sabzi also.
Yeah, we do that, yeah.
So I would be very happy to have the sun-dried kachri and try it out.
Yeah, I'll email it to you. Oh, sorry, I'll mail it to you, not email. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your answer.
Good evening, sir. Firstly, it was lovely hearing you. And so I just want to share one thing that I strongly believe in the idea of how especially how food unites people, like from different cultures and from different states. And I have grown up as a very shy and introverted kid. So I come from a place which is very culturally rich and which has a variety of food. Like I come from Rajasthan, Jodhpur, and where it has food. Basically, we make food which is basically can be remade. For example, we have sevaiya ki sabji, and which is very quick to make.
Sevaiya ki sev ki sabzi.
Yeah, sev ki sabji, papad ki sabji, which is very quick to make. So my parents told me ki since people are mostly from the farming background and they're more into low peasantry livelihood. So they don't get time to cook and everything. So they something quick to go to the fields. So how is this culture evolved?
Two or three things quickly. Please. Yes. I'll feel really embarrassed otherwise. I think, first of all, do you have a person sitting here who would say, I come from a place which is culturally poor? All of us come from a place where culture is rich, whether it's Mithila or whether it's Rajasthan, Jodhpur or Bikaner or Udaipur or Kota or whatever, Alwar. That's number one. Number two, when you talk of dishes, it is not only what can be cooked easily and quickly. It is what the natural produces. Rajasthan was an area where fresh vegetables were scarce. The communities were mostly vegetarian, Marwadis, Jains, etc., except the Rajput princes who hunted and ate meat. So you were constrained to make dishes of different flavor out of gram flour which grew there. वो सेव भी होता था, गट्टे की सब्जी भी होती थी, उसको आप खाते थे. So this is improvisation because of the climate, because of the naturally availability of ingredients, and that's it. And then it acquires a cultural overtone.
I think we can. We'll be winding up now. I think it's been a wonderful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And of course, we will all be, I've already read the book. I'm sure everybody's looking forward to reading the book, and another feather in your cap.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here as well.
Thank you so much, Swapna and Pushpesh. Thank you everyone for being a wonderful audience. Books are available. You can buy a copy, you can get them signed. They're both here. Thank you so much.